I am just so pleased to welcome Wanda Reeder. She came on a call from Robin Podmore. Thank you very much, Robin. And I just think you'll be so pleased to hear what she has to say, and a great learning as well. Wanda is the Vice President of Power System Services at SNC Electric, Global Architect for SNC's Global Services Operations in Chicago, and Chair, this is why we have her here, Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE Smart Grid Task Force. She's got more than 27 years of expertise in the electric utility industry, President of the IEEE PES in 2008 and 2009, served on the IEEE PES Governance Board, but here's what's really cool. She's a member of Energy Secretary Stephen Chu's DOE Electricity Advisory Board, and recently appointed as chairperson of the Smart Grid Subcommittee. And she came all the way out to see us in the middle of that busy life. So when do you have some fun? Right now, right? Thank you, Wanda.
Thanks, Barbara. It's a great pleasure to be here. I have, from what I've seen of the developments that you've been doing in the Northwest on workforce, I'm impressed. I think you're truly leaders in the country. You figured out how to collaborate and work together and push through paradigms to develop the workforce and truly connect that to economic viability of the area. And I think you're on a wonderful journey. There's always a lot more to learn and a lot more to do, but what you've accomplished is something definitely worth celebrating. I hope that my comments here today can add to some of the thoughts and stimulate additional activity going forward, and look forward to meeting you throughout the rest of the conference. My remarks really are focused on a couple things. One is smart grid, and where are we going as a power and energy industry? And then, of course, what are the implications on the workforce side? And actually, both pieces are passions of mine, and I like to look at them together because I think that they really do go hand in hand. And I'll talk through, investments in the United States and globally on smart grid, talk about some of the technologies, but really where that's taking us on the workforce journey. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And it's easy to get up here and do PowerPoint after PowerPoint, but I'd like you to just focus on the slides, because I got a couple pictures that I think really set the stage for what we need to do over the upcoming years. This slide shows where we were in 2008 from a satellite projection. And if you fast forward to 2030, wow. That takes a lot of people and a lot of infrastructure, doesn't it? Let's do this again. If it goes backwards, 2008, 2030. So it makes you think about where are the people going to come from in order to figure out what the generations mix is going to be, what kind of delivery is going to be required, how do we engage consumers through the process, how do we do this so it's clean, efficient, affordable, reliable. This is a tough challenge. It's not only a tough challenge in the northwestern part of the U.S., but a tough challenge globally. And we really need to get out of the box and think differently about what we do day in and day out in order to accomplish this successfully. There's a couple other things that's going on right before us. I bet every single one of you have some kind of digital device on your person right now. Maybe one or two or three. And that's changing. Those digital devices are proliferating very, very rapidly. In fact, I think it's easy for us to kind of put ourselves in the box of I am in delivery, or I generate, or I, am in education or whatever. But in reality, we are here to service a digital economy. And that digital economy is emerging very, very fast. In fact, much of what we do or have done for the last 100 or 125 years is predicated on the loads that we have served. But that's changing quickly, and as those change, so are the expectations and the level of service. For example, consumer electronics represent the largest single use for domestic electricity right now. If you fast forward, by 2020, computers and gadgets will account for 45% of the electricity used in homes. What does this mean? It means that I expect to touch the button on that screen and get information ASAP about anything I want to, because I get it everywhere else about anything else. And I also expect electricity to be there, and I expect the power quality to actually service this digital economy. So I think it really has implications on what we do from a grid perspective, from a generation perspective, because it is changing, and it's changing quick. And yet, I take a breath and I think about, where are we? And have we really adjusted our practices in how we go about servicing this digital economy? And if not, what do we need to do? From a load factor perspective, we have been going downhill since the 50s. What does that mean? It means the loads that we serve are more peakier. We have to put in more generation, more wires, year after year after year, to service that very small amount of time when we hit our peak conditions. We can do better. I know we can. In fact, now we're around 50% of load factor, and it's been going downhill for quite some time. Assets are aging. We're not investing at the rate that they are aging. So, you know, eventually that will catch up with us. Peak conditions last less than 1% of the time throughout the year. So those of you that have been in the operating seat, which I know Robin Podmore's worked with most of the operators around the country and many globally, what that means is you're sitting there in that hot seat on those days with very peak conditions, and there is just, it's challenging. We have more and more vulnerability in the system. We're running it closer and closer to the edge, and we've got to think about, you know, how do we make sure that we are continuing to invest and put technology into the system so that it continues to run reliably. I kind of look at this and say it's inevitable. We have to modernize this grid. It's not a question of, you know, if, it's a question of when. And when we do so, we need to do it intelligently. We need to think about what kind of technologies we're going to overlay, insert, so that we are bringing in technologies to do it better than what we have over the last few years. You know, Barbara mentioned that I'm on the DOE Electricity Advisory Committee, and I started at the end of 2010. I reflect back on one of the presentations that was made about that time. We never would have guessed the implications of fracking on our energy supply. This graph shows from 2010 to 2050 what the projected generation sources will be, and you can see that more and more is consumer contributions and green contributions. Existing coal, of course, is getting retired through, you know, EPA regulations right now, et cetera. I think, if anything that I've learned over the last 2 years, it's that what we think the projection is going to change. It will change by definition. So we've got to figure out how to be nimble and how to be flexible and how to adjust with the times. The only thing that we know for certain is that it will change. So we have to think about how we make the systems operate in a way that can adjust and ebb and flow for the conditions that we have, and you know, and the changes that are before us. So, you know, I think this really leads us up to, we are amongst, you know, a transformation in the industry for a lot of reasons, and that's driving technology. That transformation is coming from a lot of different drivers. Growing population and more electronics, which I talked about, rising cost of energy, environmental concerns, security concerns, heightened demands on financial returns, et cetera. Those are driving the technologies that we embark upon and are actually, you know, busy developing and implementing. Typically revolving around carbon, electric transportation, efficiency, grid modernization, and reliability. Tremendous opportunities here. You know, I think we often don't step back and connect what we're doing kind of to the big picture message. And if we did this, I think consumers would have a better understanding of why we're doing this. I think that policy and regulatory folks would have a bigger picture rather than kind of a short term, we don't want to raise rates. But fundamentally, we have a lot of opportunity. For example, in those slides, we're forecasting about 37% projected load growth between now and 2030. So that in itself is pretty significant, yet each year we're wasting about 170 billion kilowatt hours just from insufficient power usage information. And if you look at worldwide CO2 emissions, about 25%, 1/4, comes from generation itself. Wow. We're doing it to ourselves, folks. Again, I say, we can do better. So, you know, some simple things. We already have technology in place that can reduce peak loads by 15%. We have shown that the U.S. could save infrastructure spending of about $70 billion in the next 20 years through better management of existing assets. We can lower emissions. We just have to put it together and change some paradigms and change some rules and, you know, adopt some technology. But like I say, there's definitely opportunity. And this would ultimately led DOE to some significant stimulus spending in order to advance smart grid. In fact, right now there's about $7.9 billion that's going into various smart grid deployments through stimulus projects throughout the United States. We're 3 years into a 5-year spend. And, you know, some of those projects are moving along nicely and have benefits already showing for them, and others, it's taking a while, as you might imagine, managing about 100 projects over a 5-year period. The interesting thing here is that we really need to leverage this. We have one shot at leveraging these projects. And if you look at what EPRI ultimately estimates the delivery portion in the United States for grid modernization, they're saying upwards of $500 billion by 2030. And if you look at the Brattle Group, their estimates are even higher than that, $880 billion. So if you believe that the infrastructure that we have is aging and getting a little long in the tooth, and we need to overlay and insert technologies to do this stuff better, there's some big dollars up here. Big dollars. And we've got to figure out how to leverage what we're learning, share best practices, share lessons learned, figure out what the gaps and disconnects are so we can advance R&D, advance policy, advance workforce development in order to make that happen. And fundamentally, that's why we're here. That's the essence of what we're doing. This is connected to economic viability. This is connected to the U.S. economy. This is big stuff, folks, and we got to have the workforce in order to do it. Now, it's not just us that's on this journey. In fact, other countries also see this as well. So, in addition to our $7 billion of stimulus funding for smart grid advancements, China's also, you know, in the middle of a $7 billion spend. Brazil, South Korea, there's about 10 countries that have similar programs that are going on in various facets, but big dollars as well, very much paralleling what we are doing here. So now I get down into, you know, the real smart grid projects. In my job at S&C, we're a manufacturer in Chicago, but we also manufacture in China, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, have folks in the UK, Australia. The neat thing is that I can be associated with really interesting product innovation in manufacturing. And those products find their way into the field. I run the services side. So if our customers, no matter if they're commercial industrial customers or utility customers, we're involved in the training, the engineering, and in some cases the construction and the ongoing maintenance of getting these technologies into the field. So for example, you know, we have reactive compensation equipment to help integrate renewables. We've put in large batteries throughout the country, you know, 1 megawatt to 4 megawatts lasting up to 6 hours. We have self-healing technology for the distribution system. There's even storage now that's going in on kind of the consumer side to help smooth the loads from solar penetration and plug-in vehicles, and there's developments on the microgrid piece as well. So the interesting thing is I have a workforce laboratory right outside my door. I know how hard it is to find the people. I know how hard it is to get them trained. I know how hard it is. I know that the growth of my service area is fundamentally how rapidly we can assimilate folks in and have juniors and seniors work together to advance and develop them. I work closely with the academic community so that, we're bringing in folks that have as much background as possible. But all of that said, it's pretty clear that there's a lot of attrition in front of us, and it takes quite a while to get folks up to speed. And it's also very clear to me that the customers that we do work for, there's gaps in their workforce, and that's why they ask us to step in and help augment their existing capabilities. So I ponder. We've got $7 billion of spend going on. We talk about smart grid. There's been a lot of meters. There's been a lot of technology that is either in place or is being deployed. And I step back and go, okay, so where are we headed? Do we have all of the piece parts? Where are the gaps? What can we do about it? And what are the real implications to the business? Are we really transforming? There's a lot of infrastructure out there in order to really change. And I kind of made a list here of where we have been and where I think we need to be. And the list is long in terms of transformation. It covers a wide range. For example, regulatory models need to change. We're going from centralized generation to one that has distributed generation and green resources. Centralized dispatch to one that has more distributed intelligence throughout the infrastructure. One where we had at least N-1 contingency, and we've been pushing on that for a while. One where, in the loads that we used to serve, a 5-minute outage was just fine, and it was very much tolerated. And now with more and more digital loads, a 5-minute outage just doesn't cut it anymore. So the tolerance level for outages is slipping quickly. We're going from, kind of over-designing the grid to an exhausted one where there's radial distribution, to one where the design's likely going to change significantly depending on what the reliability requirements are, but likely going to be more meshed and more looped. One where, fundamentally it's been pretty homogeneous in nature, and as we overlay communications and sensors and batteries, we're dealing with, equipment that was kind of electromechanical in nature that would last for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, in some cases longer than that. And we're inserting electronics and components that don't necessarily have that long a life. So, how do we make this heterogeneous mix work together harmoniously? Relatively slow distribution operations to one where there's near real-time microgrids that need to fit in and work well, and unidirectional power flows as compared to multi-directional. And I didn't even put the workforce thing up here because guess what? Workforce gets scattered throughout. So we have, those are the things that kind of come to my mind as I ponder this smart grid evolution. And then on top of that, how do we make the workforce successful in this, not only for where we are today, but where do we need to go in the future? And it's not only the actual people, but it's the processes and systems that they use as well. I got a couple slides from Ann Randazzo from the Center for Workforce Energy Development, and, oh, warning, I'm not sure what that's all about, but she ended up completing a survey in 2007, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and the data from 2007 through 10 suggested that about half of our workforce would retire in the next 5 years, retire or attrit for whatever reasons. And now with the economic lull, what we're seeing is that it'll be, maybe pushed out to 2020, a little bit longer, because we're finding that many of the workforce is staying until, their 401ks pick up. In some ways, that's good, because it buys us more time to prepare. But my concern is that we're actually building a tsunami, and it's a little bit invisible. So to the extent that the economy comes back up and everybody decides to go golfing, guess what? We got a problem. We got a problem, and it can happen overnight. So, most of my time has been on more the engineering side of this equation, but fundamentally this story runs true and true for all jobs in the power and energy space. On the technician and engineering front, her 2011 survey suggested 52% of the skilled workforce would be eligible to leave in about 10 years. So you can see from retirement and various ways, ready now versus retained, that's where the survey results are coming out, and 62% of all the workforce may need to be replaced in the next 10 years. Think about that. 62% of those that are currently doing work, keeping the lights on 24/7, we depend on that tribal knowledge that they have gathered over decades of experience and time on the job out the door. And that's why we're here, isn't it? That's exactly why we're here. This picture shows the tsunami. So that blue bar, 4 into the right, 2008, 9, 10, 2011, the blue portion of that stack are the ones that can go now, ready now. So as soon as they got enough and they think they can retire and they want to, potentially they can go out the door. And I think that's the part of the story that we just kind of, they're there working, and it's easy to kind of say, well, everything's fine, but it is kind of a ticking time bomb, if you will. All right, and the actual numbers here on the engineering front, those are the ones that I look at, but she's got it for line workers, technicians, plant operators, engineers. Fundamentally, we're in a good strong half of the workforce is at risk in the upcoming years, is kind of how I look at it. Now, meanwhile, what's happened on the education front? In the engineering side, the power engineering curriculum has eroded over the years. I think there's been a bit of a comeback. There's certainly a bit of a comeback from student interest. But, it's a challenge because undergraduate specialization is becoming less prevalent. We have encouraged more and more classes in electives to be put into curriculums. And it's difficult to actually encourage specialization at that undergraduate level. So for me that's hiring and I want to get a bachelor's, you can't count on having much power background coming in. And that's a challenge. We've also seen that the demographics in faculty very much mirror those in industry, and those that are still teaching, many of them are looking at retirement as well. And so we really need more kind of pipeline for the power faculty, and I think a way to understand the demand and supply, both from the faculty perspective and also the needs in industry and the pipeline that's being created. I don't think as a country, we have a very good mechanism. Certainly in a regional perspective, to the extent you're talking and collaborating, you can kind of keep your finger on the pulse, but it would be nice to have a systematic way to really connect the dots, and I'm not sure that we do. This is a picture of the power faculty at Iowa State over the years, and I think it's indicative of what's happened in many places. To the extent that a position opens up, oftentimes it's replaced with something else or it's not replaced at all. In the Power and Energy Society, we have done survey work, and that's been manual, so it takes a lot of work to crank through that. Usually it's every 2 or 3 years, sometimes 4 before we repeat it. And this is a comparison of what happened in 87-88 timeframe versus 2005-06. There was actually a 50% decline in power engineering programs from 48 universities that participated, and only 15% grew. So we intuitively know that. I think, there's been a resurgence, but we really have to work on the foundation. Fortunately, PES is now making that survey work automatic, so we will have more frequent knowledge of what's going on, which I think is part of the formula to connect the supply and demand going forward. How many of you know about Power and Energy Society by IEEE? Just curious. A few. Okay. So yeah, that's a technical association. It's affiliated with IEEE. We're the 3rd largest society. There's 29,000 members. The reason that power system runs 24/7 and interoperates is largely because of the standards that have come out of that. So it's, it has all of the many conferences throughout the world, publications, technical publications, meetings. So it's really a technical forum for development of technology and associated standards. And one of the things that we realized in the mid-2000s is that we did have a workforce problem. So we did a national workforce workshop with the National Science Foundation in 2007, excuse me. And that ultimately led to a report that was published in April of 2009. This report actually was one of the major drivers that went into the decision to release the $100 million of stimulus funding from DOE for workforce development. But behind this, there were six recommendations, and it was focused on the engineering side, but it said we really needed to double the pipeline of power engineers currently going through in anticipation of the attrition rates. We didn't have enough, and we didn't have much time to do it. So the first three recommendations were focused around a scholarship internship program, recognizing that many kids that find their way into engineering, decide which direction to go once they get into college, and that would be the fastest way to put pedal to the metal to double the pipeline. And so the Power and Energy Society has embarked upon a scholarship internship program to fulfill those top three objectives. The bottom three were focused on shoring up that educational foundation, i.e. recognizing we needed to increase the faculty, recognizing that centers of excellence were a good thing in order to concentrate efforts and facilitate collaboration, and of course, recognizing that there was a connection between research and the educational wherewithal, so that needed to be shored up as well. So this report is available online, and it might give you a little history of why we're here. In terms of the Power and Energy Society's scholarship program, it took us a while to get organized, and we actually launched this in 2011. We as PES put in $1 million of seed money in 2010 in order to get the website up and kind of fund the first round of scholars, if you will. But this is targeted at undergraduates. You need 1 year of college in order to apply. The application process for 2012 is still open through the end of this month, so if you know of people that qualify, I encourage them to get online quick. If they get in and are accepted as a sophomore, they can receive up to $7,000 in scholarship funding, $2,000, $2,000, and $3,000 respectively for sophomore, junior, and senior. I think the thing that really differentiates this from a typical scholarship program is that we facilitate career experiences between sophomore and junior year and junior and senior year. So we recognize that the key to attracting the best and brightest into the industry is that work experience, the relationships, understanding what the jobs are about, actually assimilating them into a community. This part is really, really important. Granted, it's for U.S. citizens or permanent residents, those that have a 3.0 grade point average, ABIT accredited university. They got to take 3 different classes that are power related throughout the journey. So, we're definitely kind of getting them from an education perspective. We want the best and the brightest and those that are oriented towards power. But I think the thing that really is neat is also the career experience. This is a snapshot of our scholarship award winners in 2011. We released 93 scholarships from 51 universities throughout the United States. Each one of those different colors is a region that's in conjunction with the IEEE regions. There's actually organizing committees in each region that do the selection process. They're made up of both industry and academics. And yeah, we're really proud of these results. And of course, we're now well underway for applicants in 2012. Those award winners will be announced this fall. So again, if you know of anybody that would apply, could qualify, encourage them to get on the website and do that, ee-scholarship.org. And also, if you're interested in contributing to the program, you can also do that there on that website as well. We use a website called pes-careers.org to facilitate that employer-student career experience. And this was actually launched before the scholarship was. It's free of charge, and you can find power engineers on here. Right now, there's some 800 students and some 300 job opportunities. And we, of course, specially flag the scholarship winners so folks know that they are, have risen to kind of the cream of the crop, if you will. Students can use it up to 1 year after graduation, so it's applicable both for internships and for full-time employment. And yeah, we've had some tremendous success with this, and I think it's really foundational for the program. Click. Yep, for me, kind of being an evangelist on this topic, it's been really rewarding to actually see scholars come into the program and to see some of the testimonials that come out, because you know that you're really making a difference. And so it's just been a ton of fun. This is supported by industry. There's a fundraising campaign that's going on, which I chair. We're seeking $10 to $12 million over 3 years to fund this, and we've got about $4 million now. So some of the companies that have stepped up at various ranges are listed there, and you'll notice one from your home state of Washington. SEL is right at the top. So we've had some tremendous support from Washington State. Just to give you some examples, John Bose has been very, very supportive. Henry Louie, Hardev Judge from Bonneville Power, SEL, of course, with financial sponsorship, both Ed Schweitzer and Jackie Peer. So Washington State has been a tremendous supporter of the program, and I thank the support that it has come from this region. All right, I'm going to change gears a little bit now and talk about what I see in terms of transitioning the workforce. This PES scholarship piece is really a way to bring people in, but we've got a lot of folks that are currently in chairs doing very productive work right now while our world is changing. So what do we have to do? How do we do this? How do we look at it? How do we plan? I like to think of things pretty simple. And this 2x2 matrix is what my head goes through. One is legacy assets, the stuff that we've built over 100 years, and the new stuff we're putting in. And the other axis is the existing employees and the new employees. And for me, each one of those blocks really has a planning element that goes along with it, and some blocks influence others. So I look at the lower left-hand side, existing employees and legacy assets, and go, well, if half or more of those are going to leave, we've got to really put the pedal to the metal and figure out how do we do that knowledge transfer? How do we get all of that history moved into others? And I think that that in itself requires training on the job site. It requires the ability to, gather teams together and rapidly solve problems and get folks that have been immersed in the industry to work with others. And I think that kind of overlaying some expectations that needs to be done, most will step up to the challenge. In fact, I've seen that most enjoy working with others and passing along their knowledge, but they often need a little bit of a boost to do so. As I think about the new assets coming into play, I think that there's a lot of employee development that needs to be done, both of the existing folks and the new folks. And the new folks can come in and shed perspective that we don't necessarily have. They know how to spin computers and bring data to, in reports and information like no other. It's amazing what they can do with these tools, and we need to really leverage that. But on the other hand, with that legacy information is very important. As we bring new folks in, either from college, from technical schools, or mid-career that don't necessarily have these backgrounds, mentorship is important, really, really important, and that requires another element of planning. And then, of course, the upper right-hand side is curriculum development. The more that we can get out of the educational process to position us for the future, the easier it is once they're in position. Right now, there just isn't bandwidth like there used to be when I started up in this industry. I was blessed with people that could kind of tuck me under their wing. Started out at Northern States Power, now Excel in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then went down to Exelon or ComEd in Chicago. But along the way, I've been blessed with people that have kind of, shared their thoughts and led the way. And as I look at the workforce now, we're in a much different situation. We are very constrained. There's a lot to do, and there's not many people to do it. So you can't count on as much training and OJT as what we had in the past. Therefore, the more that we can get out of the educational system to get these folks prepared, the better off. And that's true coming right out of school as entry level, but I think that's also true from an emerging perspective where you might have mid-career folks with some, fundamentals from a different industry, for example, that we're retooling. We just really, really need the educational process to kind of fold into the times that we have right now. I think that we need to help industry contemplate how these facets get rolled up into strategic planning. It's got to be front and foremost in, how the goals are established. So many times you sit around and you look at that budget and you know what gets cut? training, right? New hires. And we just can't we just can't keep this thing going with 50 to 60% of our workforce without contemplating that, embedding the workforce development piece into the strategic plans from a very core perspective. And the more that we can reinforce that, I think the better off we will be. Another piece that I'd like to talk about is the multidisciplinary nature of what is evolving before us. It used to be a power engineer was a power engineer, and they went in, they did their thing, and they did it well. And guess what? What they have to now understand is much more of a panoramic than what it used to be. In fact, this came out of a paper that Jerry Height did at one of our PES conferences in 2009, suggesting a smart grid engineer contains all of these facets: automatic controls, information technology, standards, power electronics, computer engineering, data management, marketing, economics, systems theory, energy conservation, public policy, signal processing, T&D engineering, engineering physics. Wow, that's a lot of stuff, isn't it? I can only say that, it's impossible for somebody to be an expert in every one of these areas, but to the extent that at least you get into the quadrant of you know what you don't know, and you can ask the questions, that's a lot better than being in the quadrant of you don't know what you don't know, and you're not asking what needs to be asked in order to solve the problem. And I think, we need to find a way to introduce this so that we can bring the right people to the table, and we also need to encourage kind of a transition of culture. This is a hard thing to talk about. But what I've found is that we are really good running things in a command and control way where the leader knows the answers and they commission folks to go out and get it done. But the fundamental assumption there is the top brass has an idea of what needs to be solved, and they're suggesting what needs to happen. And I think as we move forward, there's too many opportunities in the corners of the room, and we need to engage folks with a lot of different backgrounds that can find the opportunities and work together quickly to solve problems. And that's why I think that we're in a process of really transitioning from a culture perspective so that we can engage folks from all different sectors, from all different backgrounds, so that we can come up with solutions that make sense and we can do it rapidly. We need this to get good ideas on the table fast. We need this for buy-in. We need it for employee development. I think that the concept of quickly assembling teams with the right backgrounds, doesn't matter if it's IT or data or the customer side or delivery or general, whatever it is. You get the right folks in the room, you put the challenge on the table and you commission them to solve it, and you move on, implement and let it go. So we'll see if I'm right, who knows, but that's my 2 cents. And along with this, I think there's an element of diversity that's inevitable. I look around the rooms that I often go to and participate in conferences, and it's pretty obvious that as an industry, we're going to be much more diverse in the future than we have been in the past. It's just got to be. And I think that, to the extent that we as an industry are able to embrace it and really leverage and encapsulate and encourage the ideas to come forward and work with them to come out with solutions, those that are successful at doing that will be the winners. Because we really need the creativity of everybody in order to solve problems. And I think there's been a lot of research that shows that diversity ultimately results in better solutions, especially in a situation where there's a lot of change. So we are ripe for this. Now is the time. I think there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity in this industry, and I think the diverse workforce is inevitable, and it's just going to result in some tremendous successes going forward. So to wrap it up, it's obvious we're changing. We're changing it as an industry, and we need to in order to accommodate the changes in society. We are going to grow. We might have a little bit of a lull from an economic perspective right now, but Power is the lifeblood of economic development, and we need to have it. It's so critical, and we need to make the connection of an economic viability to our industry and make that story so that others get it as well. Investment will find its way into this industry, and we need the workforce in order to get it done. We need to do it in a way that contemplates the changes of the future rather than reinventing the past. I think there's a lot of good programs, a lot of good education, a lot of good collaboration that's underway. The more that we can connect the dots and think about ways to do things better, the better off we all will be. And I'll just conclude with, thinking about this is a new day, and we are creating a new workforce. We really need to manage through the transition together. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions? Okay, Barbara says questions are good.
Questions,
Oh.
questions, Diane. Oh,
Joe has
Joe,
some too.
okay, Joe, you go first, and I'll take the mic to Diane.
Okay, well, one of the most glaring things I was noticing there was something we were talking about actually before you started your talk, and that was I saw that with the scholarships you were offering, you had 23% were female. Like say our college enrollment, 61% female. What are the obstacles that you see that we really need to overcome in order to get that whole area of applicants interested in moving into these professions?
Well, I think there's a couple. One is to the extent that we have role models, we need to get them out in the forefront. I think that the female in math and science is much broader than just our sector alone. Nationally we struggle with this. There's probably things that we can learn from other countries, because as you travel abroad, you realize that others actually may even be dominated by female in some cases. But we need to make sure that, in the grade schools, there is awareness of the opportunities, and that we're encouraging females around the 4th grade to continue with math and science. So the problem really starts way back there. As I think about the opportunities that we have, I mentioned the role model piece, which is important. If you look at the industries, though, where females are doing very well, and there are some where females actually, even technical ones, where females are the majority, often it's where there's a connection to society at large, where they can see that, they're making a difference to the betterment of mankind, and they can, and I think that part of our story hasn't been told very well. Consumers think of us when the lights go out, and we're taken for granted when they flip the switch. And if we can paint the macro story that we really are the lifeblood to society, and we need females in this industry, I think that we can really leverage that message and we can attract folks in.
So my question is about the supply and demand comment that you made about we need to do a better job of matching what the demand is in industry to how education is match with that. And I wondered if you'd seen any best practices around the country that you could comment on, or even in other countries. What's the key to making that connection stronger?
The supply and demand question. Well, I think that we need to do it. I think it is a challenge, and I don't know that there's a lot of best practice out there right now. I think about Ann Randazzo when she called me out of the blue, just starting CEWD, and she's like, everybody's talking about you, Wanda, and I found you on the website, and so I go there. That was before she was putting the survey work together. And now with the hindsight of a few years of survey work, at least we're getting a better handle on that component. And I think that in order to really tie the whole equation together, what we need is kind of a macro plan, and then we need to make sure the measurements and the survey instruments are in place in order to connect the dots. Because right now the gaps just aren't clear. The other thing that I'd say about the survey mechanisms is that it's easy to ask the question and get answers of today, and today looking in the rearview mirror. So kind of on top of all of this mechanical equation, if you will, I think we need to overlay it with an instrument that kind of puts some subtleties around, what's the implications going forward? What are the productivity benefits that are going to result? What are the emerging areas, and how does that kind of tweak what answers might be coming from just taking a snapshot? So there's a lot of work to do. Fortunately, I think CEWD and the survey work has given us one piece, and there's others that we need to shore up along the way.
So Wanda, of all the brilliant things you said, one of them that struck me was one of your later slides when you looked at the power engineer and all the qualities and attributes and skills that a power engineer needs now. I was speaking yesterday in this pre-conference, and one of the things I mentioned during that presentation was I used to be a vice president at Southern California Edison for energy efficiency, and I had maybe 17 or 18 engineers working for me, power engineers, and I said the ones that really were the most valuable to me were the ones I could understand, and could help make that translation. But it seems to me that ability or that quality to have not just a really strong power engineer who's seeped deeply in that knowledge base, but can understand business models and business practices and policy. Those people need to be so much more nimble than perhaps they used to be in the past. Any other insights on how to, my personal view is power engineering programs need to take courses in other fields as well that help support that Renaissance man or woman power engineer, if you will. But any other thoughts you might have on that piece?
A few. You know, I've had the opportunity to speak to the ECE leaders a couple times, and you know, there's frustration right now in the higher education that the energy space is kind of going in the mechanical side. It's like there is a lot of opportunity, I think, where domains intersect. And we need to figure out, you know, where computer and power and nano, you know, in communications and business, find the opportunities where those intersections occur and figure out how to get activity around it. Because I think that's how we really take leadership and innovation. And I think that from an education perspective, that's where it starts. It's really easy to paint box both in the education side and also on the industry side and do it very much in silos. And we are a product of the silo world, right? So like you say, the ones that tend to be successful right now are the ones that can kind of stay on both sides of the silo and do the translation. And I think that, you know, we need to reinvent ourselves so that we're much more collaborative and can bring different kinds of disciplines in and not so much just kind of talk about it in a room, but actually present challenges and get solutions out of groups that have a lot of different backgrounds. To the extent that we can cultivate that in the education piece, it will help move the industry. I think in parallel, though, we're going to have to work on the industry piece as well through that top-down strategy part so that quick forming teams that involve the folks in conservation and load management and delivery and generation and IT can get after problems and actually put solutions on the table. And I think between the two, we will move the culture, but it's going to take work.
So our Center of Excellence depends on Diane Quincy at Avista for questions, and she asks the best questions. I always try to figure out where her mind goes. So, so she says she has another question, so I trust her on that.
So in addition to what we were just talking about with the power engineering career and technical community college programs, what are you seeing that might be in parallel or different? So what would be your advice to the audience in the room today that we have a lot of community college and career and technical, given this perspective you have?
Okay, well, I'm not an educator, so I can tell you what I think might work, but you're the ones that know this domain much better than I do. I think that we're going to have to create education that is much more nimble than it has been in the past. So to the extent that we've created these hard silos, and you know, I have to decide which silo to step in, and then my career is a destiny from there on out, and I got to live in this silo. I think that's really what we have to figure out, how to make much more nimble and flexible. And to the extent that we can create a way so that there's kind of modular education and we can recognize those modules, I think that it will allow people much more flexibility along their career. You know, maybe for a while I've got, you know, the physical characteristics to go out and do field work, and then kind of midstream I want to bring all of that back into the office, and that can be leveraged in other ways. But right now we kind of have these rules that are made up that say if you don't carry this piece of paper, And you know, I just think that if there was a way to allow people to migrate through the system and kind of make incremental adjustments, it would be much better from the personnel perspective, the employee development perspective, and as an industry. To the extent that we need to add pieces that aren't foreseen right now, it gives us the flexibility to do that too.
I am with Gonzaga University's T&D engineering program. It's a master's program for T&D engineers, and I just wanted to say you just nailed it. We've seen our program just explode, double enrollment every year, and one thing we've really seen the last couple of years is this huge influx of civil engineers and computer science grads who are now working to design substations or dealing with 61850 regulations, and they never took a power course. So we're actually having to go back and develop some courses for them so that they can start taking some of our other courses. So you've nailed it. They really come in siloed and have no idea what power is.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Allison, okay.
Hi, thanks for being here today. I have a comment and a question, which are sort of unrelated. The comment was about getting girls and women into this field. And I have a 13-year-old, and I am convinced that it has nothing to do with math aptitude. It has everything to do with the social schism that happens in middle school. And that if we want to intervene, we have to figure out some way to do that. Because my daughter just does not want to hang out with like what she perceives as geeky guys or whatever. There's a social awkwardness that happens. And so what are the interventions we can do there? I don't know, sociological experiments or something. But it's difficult because, there's a lack of budgets and things like that. So if we wanted to have two separate tracks, separating the boys and girls for a while, or I don't know. Anyway, that's a comment. The second thing I wanted to say is that the scholarships I was very intrigued by, and it looks like they're just at universities. Do you have scholarships for community college students that would be going on the transfer track to a university engineering program?
Yeah, well, on the female one, research has shown that girls decide that they're going to be good in math or not in the 4th grade. So I agree, it has nothing to do with aptitude or their ability or anything else. It's a decision of if they're going to pursue that and like it and, keep up with it, or they're going to check out. And the vast majority decide, I'm checking out. And I really do think it's a societal issue. We are not leveraging that huge talent pool, and we need to put in place ways to kind of mitigate it early on. And I think that we're going to have to work with Department of Education, Department of Labor, and keep pushing, keep dripping water on this rock in order to turn the tide, if you will, right there in kind of in that early informative stage. And then, of course, there's reinforcement mechanisms that really need to be applied all the way out. But if you lose them then, you never get them back. So, that was the first question or comment. And then your second one was scholarships and community colleges. We talked about this, but what we decided from the power and energy perspective, we are very much focused on higher education and, certainly the colleges that offer, the advanced degrees in power are the ones that we have a close affinity to. So we decided to get off the starting blocks where we knew we could be successful first, and that was with electrical engineers and really trying to advance the pipeline of that pool. Right now, we're in the process of expanding this program globally where it makes sense, because it doesn't make sense in all parts of the world, but certainly in some. And we're staying focused on the higher education part. It's not to say, though, that this model doesn't make sense for the other pieces as well, but we just want to make sure that when it comes to folks that really know the power systems piece and are there to keep the system reliable as we overlay these technologies and fundamentally go through a paradigm in how we think about and apply technologies, that we have the technical wherewithal to do that. And I think there's ample opportunity for scholarships and internships to bolster the other pieces as well. It's just not our focus area right now.
So I'm going to put Robin on the spot if I
Oh,
could.
good.
I couldn't find him, that's why I was wandering around. So could you answer Allison's questions on community colleges and IEEE PES?
Yeah, well, firstly, I want to thank Wanda for being here. I'm Robin Podmore, and Wanda has an ability to see a latent passion and talent in people that they don't even know they have. So she asked me to represent Power and Energy Society on the Global Humanitarian Technology Challenge. And I don't know why, but it's become a great passion. And so as a result of helping a group of engineers get together to come up with open source designs to hopefully light up the world for the 1.5 billion people that don't have power, I was asked to become VP of New Initiatives and Outreach. And so Wanda and I have not had time to connect on this, but I have also have a proposal that one of those new initiatives be outreach to community colleges. So you now have this is sort of like breaking news, and we really we've run it by the IEEE Board of, the PES Board of Directors. And I would like to make a plug for, for the PNS. It's $35 to join IEEE, and I think it's $15 to be a Power and Energy Society member. It's the best value. If you're in the energy space, it's crazy not to join. You will find mentors, you will find lifelong relationships, you will have international travel, you can see the sort of leadership that we have. So please, make that investment. And through that, John is actually going to be coming. So I believe there's an opportunity for the scholarships if you're doing 2 years in a community college with the intention to go, like at the end of your junior year, I think you could apply with the idea that you're going to a 4-year university. But those are the issues. Barbara will be forming that committee. Let's see, Kevin Schneider will also be helping out. And so for the first time, we'll have representatives from community colleges going to the power meeting in San Diego. So if you would like to help out with that effort, please contact Barbara and lobby, because there's a tremendous amount of talent right now in the community colleges that can contribute to the Power and Energy Society, obviously. And we want to create a lifelong opportunity that if you get a 2-year degree now, you have the opportunity to go back and complete that 4-year degree. So, thank you.
I always know I can put him on the spot. Okay, we have a time for a couple more questions, and this gentleman's been waiting patiently.
So my question, I've spent some time thinking about the retirement tsunami and the fact that a lot of energy and attention has been focused on the new workforce entering into the profession. But what about the existing workforce? Many of the losses are going to be at the senior level, the leadership level, and what is perhaps what focus might be done on imparting some additional training on incumbent workers and allowing them to rise the ranks and create some of the vacancies that the new workforce would fill?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I think it's really ripe for opportunity. There is clearly education that's going to be needed for the middle workforce, both to step up into leadership roles and also to kind of assume broader responsibility, both in terms of just leading both technical, operational types of functions, and also thinking about the new technologies and the new paradigms that we're, embarking upon. Where that education comes from, I think, is going to be, a multi-pronged and probably needs to have further mapping. But, certainly technical colleges is one part of the equation. I think technical societies like the Power and Energy Society has a lot of information and forums and best practices that can be very helpful for folks that are in their career. And then I think that it's very important that, from industry's perspective, again, that we reinforce the workforce development in the strategic planning process, because to the extent that it's there as kind of a forefront in a core goal, that will help initiatives along the way in day-to-day thinking about developing people that are in place.
Hi, Wanda. Thank you for coming. I have a question about that tsunami. I keep thinking about that big purple graph, and I'm at a community college, and my question is what should we do? I mean, should we build and make sure we have lots of students and electricians, or what? Yeah, that's it, basically.
What should we do? I think that it's really important to, for somebody that's responsible for, a part of an operation like me, and you know that there's people that are in that operation working every day, and you count on them day in and day out, it's really important to kind of keep tabs on what they're thinking about when they're going to leave. And I think that you got to ask the questions and kind of know, are they thinking in 6 months? Are they thinking in 5 years? Do they have kids in school? Then they're all different, right? So that at least on a day-by-day basis gives you, as much information as possible to try and anticipate the entry and the workforce development piece. And I don't think that we do enough of that, asking and kind of really working the equation. The other thing that I think we have done, especially in this economic downturn, two things have happened. Folks that don't have their 401ks where they want them to be are holding on, buying time. But the flip side's also happening too. As business is a little soft, we're not creating those new positions. And I think in some cases we need to bite the bullet and actually bring some interns in, bring some new hires in anticipation, knowing that we may be off by a year, but it is inevitable. And the more that we can parallel those folks up and do the knowledge transfer, the more seamless it will be through the journey. And it may be counterintuitive, especially when business is a little soft, but I think we got to look at the big picture and ask the question, what happens if we don't?
My name is Delphine Armstrong, and I'm from Tacoma Public Utilities, and I noticed that we spend a lot of time focusing on the engineers, but I work on the end user side of smart grid. So I would like to add to the conversation that the engineers are very good at building the products that you need, and they're very good at giving me the things I need as an end user. But there's also a layer between the engineers and the customers that we can't ignore. And those are the people that are usually coming straight out of college with no experience, people that are what I might consider computer geeks. These young people, they catch on really quickly. Those are the people that are very valuable when we move into smart grid, because smart grid also, we find the need to educate the public. And that's where my role comes in. The engineers build the things, but I have to educate the public as to how to use the new tools that they have and how to conserve and what conservation is. And there's a whole lot of support that comes in place besides just engineers. So no matter what education you have, if you're interested in the utility or power industry, you could come in the field as a utility service rep, as a meter reader, as a customer services representative. So there's lots of support besides just the engineers. So the people coming out of community colleges, colleges without an engineering degree, we still want you.
Was that a question or a comment? Was there a question to that? All right, so we're almost out of time, but so one thing I do want to say that what has been one of my really great rewards in all of this work is watching our advisory board and our leadership that is helping to go and grow our center work, our programs across the state and across the region. So they are moving around, they're moving up the ladder. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce the new general manager of Pend Oreille County PUD, Jay Pickett, with a question.
Thank you, Barbara. So I say this carefully. My wife and I have just got our 6th daughter through high school, and my question is going to be on K through 12 outreach. And I started with 5 theories on parenting, and I have none left. So I ask this with the most sincerest heart: how important is K through 12 outreach in finding talent for the engineering field? And do you have any hints for us that may have run out of ideas?
Well, we don't have enough in math and science, and to the extent that we lose them in K through 12, you never get them back in. So, the more that we can share our stories, the better off we are. I always say, if we don't tell other folks that are in the formidable years what a great career this is, what exciting times, what great opportunities there are, who will? And often I think we don't get out there with our own stories. You know, I reflect back on how I got into power, and it was really 2 5-minute conversations that happened at the absolute right time. One, I was good in math and science. I was a freshman in algebra. I grew up in a ranch in western South Dakota and had no idea what an engineer was, other than my dad had a Navy buddy that periodically came up from California to South Dakota to visit. And he was with IBM, and all I knew is he was part of developing the barcodes. Okay, so my algebra teacher came out to me when I was in my locker in the hall and said, you know, you should think about engineering. I wish I would have. I didn't know that was an option to me. I took math. You should consider engineering. I did. You know, she was head of the rodeo club. I rodeoed, took her word, and off I went. And then in college, I was on the Dean's Advisory Council. They had one student member in there, and I had been working at South Dakota State at a company called Daktronics. The second year, I was sitting next to Lowell Endahl, who was with the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association in Washington, D.C. He said, what are you doing this summer? I'm like, oh, probably going back to Daktronics, but I'd like to do something different. So he actually created an internship opportunity for me in Washington, D.C., and that was really what got me into power. And it was those two conversations that literally were about 5 minutes each that steered me, one, into engineering, and secondly, into power. And I only share that with you because you know, it's so important to do that outreach. And you don't know the impact that you're having on these folks by just having those simple conversations. We owe it to ourselves, and more importantly, we owe it to them.
All right, okay, one last question. We got a labor question here. Oh, statement. Okay, we got a labor statement here. Okay. Good, Rick.
Rick Johnson, President IBW 77. As somebody who served a 4-year apprenticeship, the original 4-year degree, and has watched this industry turn minimalist in its approach to training and inventory and everything else, I see the desire to crank up apprenticeships and put people in the field immediately. We call it a journeyman lineman's card a ticket, and it's basically a ticket to learn. I went through a construction apprenticeship. It's self-funded by the people who are employed in the trade. Most utilities have fund their apprenticeship programs. We've seen more and more. People learn once they get their journeyman card, you know, and with respect to engineers, the best ones I've ever known are ones who talk to the people in the field and learn how to talk to them and respect, and there's a mutual respect that's developed. So, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. So again, thank you, Wanda.
Thank you, appreciate it.